My wife texted from Miami. Just married my coworker. You're loser. I responded, cool. Then I eliminated her cards and changed the house locks. Next morning, police were at my door. I, 34M, was debugging code at 2 a.m. when my phone buzzed. The message from my wife made my blood freeze. Just married my coworker. You're loser. The typo in yours somehow made it worse. She was supposed to be at a conference in Miami. Apparently, she'd found time for a wedding. I stared at the screen for 30 seconds, then typed back, cool. My fingers moved without conscious thought. I opened our banking app and systematically canceled every card tied to our joint accounts. Credit cards, debit cards, the works. Then I called a locksmith. At 2:30 a.m., I was paying triple rates to have every lock in our house changed. The locksmith, a grizzled guy who'd probably seen everything, asked if I was sure about this. I told him my wife had just informed me she'd married someone else. He worked faster after that. By dawn, I was sitting in my kitchen with new keys, sipping coffee, and wondering what came next. I didn't have to wait long. The doorbell rang at 7 a.m. sharp. 2 police officers stood on my porch, looking official and slightly annoyed at the early hour. They asked if I was me, and when I confirmed, they said they needed to discuss some financial irregularities and a domestic dispute report. My stomach dropped. She'd called the cops. The older officer, a woman with tired eyes, explained that my wife had contacted them from Miami claiming I'd stolen her credit cards and illegally changed the locks to prevent her from accessing her home. She wanted them to force me to restore her access immediately. I invited them in and offered coffee. They declined, but sat at my kitchen table while I explained the situation. I showed them the text message about her marriage, then pulled up the banking records on my laptop. Every card I'd canceled was tied to accounts in my name. The house deed was also in my name alone, something I'd never thought much about until now. The younger officer seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. He asked if I was planning to file for divorce, and I told him I hadn't decided yet. Honestly, I was still processing the fact that my wife of 6 years had apparently gotten married to someone else on a whim. The female officer asked about my wife's belongings. I gestured toward the stairs and told them she was welcome to collect her things, but she'd need to coordinate with me first. I wasn't about to hand over keys to someone who'd just informed me she was married to another man. They left after taking down the basic details, promising to call my wife back and explain the legal realities. I felt a grim satisfaction knowing she was about to learn that spite and the law don't always align. My phone started ringing 20 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again, the voicemails were increasingly frantic. First, she was angry that I'd trapped her out of her own home. Then she was furious about the cards. By the 4th message, she was crying and saying this was all a mistake, that she'd been drunk and the marriage wasn't real. I deleted each message without listening to the end. My brother called around noon. Somehow, he'd heard about the situation, probably through my wife's sister, who had a talent for spreading family drama. He asked if I was okay and whether I needed anything. I told him I was fine and just needed time to think. He offered to come over, but I declined. I was enjoying the silence of my house, the absence of her constant chatter and complaints. For the first time in months, I felt peaceful. Update 1. The next few days blurred together. My wife kept calling, texting, and even had her sister reach out to me. The story kept changing. First, the marriage was fake. Then it was real, but she wanted an annulment. Then she claimed her coworker had forced her into it somehow. I ignored all of it. On Thursday, she showed up at my workplace. Security called me down to the lobby where she was making a scene, demanding I give her the new house keys and restore her credit cards. She looked terrible, hair unwashed, clothes wrinkled, dark circles under her eyes. She told me she'd been staying in a hotel since returning from Miami, burning through her savings. Her new husband had apparently disappeared the moment they got back to reality. She begged me to let her come home so we could work things out. I told her we could discuss arrangements for her to collect her belongings, but that was it. She started crying in the middle of the lobby, saying I was being cruel and vindictive. Security eventually escorted her out. My coworkers pretended not to stare, but I could feel their eyes on me for the rest of the day. I'd become office gossip, which I hated, but there wasn't much I could do about it. That evening, my lawyer called. I'd contacted him earlier in the week to discuss divorce proceedings. He'd reviewed the situation and had interesting news. Apparently, my wife's Miami marriage created a legal mess that actually worked in my favor. since she'd committed bigamy. Any claims she might have had to marital assets were significantly weakened. He recommended I file for divorce immediately, citing abandonment and adultery. The bigamy charge was something the state would have to pursue separately, but it strengthened my position considerably. I told him to proceed with the filing. Update 2. The divorce papers were served on Friday. My wife's reaction was swift and predictable. She hired her own lawyer, and suddenly the story changed again. Now she claimed the Miami marriage was a drunken mistake that had been annulled immediately. She wanted half of everything, including the house. Her lawyer was apparently as delusional as she was. They demanded I restore her access to the house and credit cards pending the divorce settlement. My lawyer laughed when he told me about their demands. The legal reality was simple. She'd abandoned the marriage, committed adultery, and possibly bigamy. The house was in my name. The accounts were in my name, and she'd voluntarily left. Her lawyer would have to prove she was entitled to anything, which would be difficult given the circumstances. Meanwhile, the fallout continued. Her family started reaching out, trying to mediate. Her mother called me crying, saying her daughter had made a terrible mistake, but that I was being too harsh. I told her that texting your husband to inform him you've married someone else goes beyond mistake territory. Her father was more direct. He called me an unforgiving bastard and said I was destroying his daughter's life out of spite. I reminded him that I hadn't forced her to get married in Miami, then hung up. The most interesting call came from her sister, who'd always disliked me. She admitted that my wife had been planning to leave me for months and had been having an affair with this coworker for over a year. The Miami marriage wasn't spontaneous. It was the culmination of a long-term plan. She told me this, she said, because she was tired of watching her sister play victim when she'd orchestrated the whole thing. Apparently, my wife had expected me to beg her to come back, not cut off her access to everything. I thanked her for the information and asked if she'd be willing to provide a statement to my lawyer. She agreed. Update 3. 3 weeks after the initial text, I was settling into my new routine. The house felt different without her constant presence. Cleaner, quieter, more peaceful. I'd started cooking again, something I'd given up when she'd criticized every meal I made. My wife's attempts to contact me had become increasingly desperate. She'd started showing up at places she knew I'd be: the gym, the grocery store, my favorite restaurant. Each time, she'd try to corner me into a conversation about reconciliation. During one of these encounters at the coffee shop near my office, she finally told me the truth. The affair had been going on for 18 months. She'd been planning to leave me, but wanted to secure her financial future first. The Miami marriage was supposed to be her safety net. She'd have a new husband and could claim abandonment in our divorce. What she hadn't counted on was her coworker panicking when they got back to reality. He'd realized that bigamy was a felony and had immediately distanced himself from her. She was now facing potential criminal charges and had lost both her husband and her backup plan. She begged me to take her back, promising she'd changed and learned her lesson. I told her I'd already learned mine, that I was better off without her. The divorce proceedings moved quickly after that. Her lawyer had advised her to accept my settlement offer rather than fight a losing battle. She'd get her personal belongings and her car, but nothing else. The house, the savings, the investments, all of it stayed with me. On the day we signed the papers, she made one last attempt to guilt me into changing my mind. She said I was heartless for destroying her life over one mistake. I reminded her that the mistake lasted 18 months and ended with her marrying someone else. She left the lawyer's office in tears. I felt nothing but relief. Final update. 6 months later, I was living a completely different life. I'd renovated the house, removing every trace of her presence. I'd started dating again. Nothing serious, just rediscovering what it felt like to be appreciated rather than criticized. My ex-wife had moved back in with her parents after burning through her savings. The bigamy charges had been dropped after she proved the Miami marriage was annulled, but the damage to her reputation was permanent. She'd lost her job due to the scandal and was struggling to find new employment. Her coworker had transferred to another city to escape the situation. Apparently, he'd been married too, and his wife had filed for divorce when the Miami adventure came to light. My ex-wife had managed to destroy 2 marriages with her scheme. I occasionally heard updates through mutual friends, but I'd stopped caring about her situation. She'd made her choices, and I'd made mine. The most satisfying moment came when I ran into her at a restaurant 6 months after the divorce was finalized. She was working as a server, looking tired and defeated. She saw me but didn't approach, just watched from across the room with a mixture of regret and resentment. I finished my meal, left a generous tip with another server, and walked out without acknowledging her. It wasn't cruelty, it was indifference, which was somehow worse. Looking back, that 2 a.m. text message was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to see my marriage for what it really was, a one-sided relationship with someone who viewed me as a safety net rather than a partner. Her plan had been to have her cake and eat it too. Instead, she'd lost everything while I'd gained my freedom. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone face the consequences of their own actions. I never did figure out why she'd included that typo in her text. Maybe she was drunk, maybe she was just careless. Either way, it perfectly captured the level of respect she'd had for me and our marriage. These days, I sleep better, eat better, and actually enjoy coming home to my house. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be content with my own company. My ex-wife had taught me that being alone was better than being with the wrong person. The police never came back to my door. The locksmith had done good work, and I'd never had to use those new keys to keep anyone out. They were just symbols of the boundaries I'd finally learned to set. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd responded differently to that text, if I'd begged her to come back or tried to fight for our marriage. But then I remember the 18 months of lies, the calculated betrayal, and the complete lack of remorse until she faced consequences. My response had been perfect in its simplicity. Cool. It had said everything that needed to be said and nothing that didn't. It was the period at the end of a sentence I'd been writing for 6 years without realizing it. The house is quiet now, but it's a good quiet. It's the sound of a life rebuilt on honest foundations, free from the chaos of someone who'd never learned the difference between love and convenience. I kept the text message for months, a reminder of how quickly everything can change. Eventually, I deleted it. I didn't need the reminder anymore. I was too busy living my new life to dwell on the old one.